These are anxious times, aren't they? COVID-19 and things like COVID-19 bring out the kind of best and the worst of humanity, and it certainly brought out our anxieties and our worries, and maybe the big daddy in that particular family is our fears. We're fearful for all sorts of things. We're fearful for our health and the health of our loved ones, our neighbours. We're fearful for the economy and our jobs and our pensions and so on. We're fearful for the amount of food and what is going to be left after all this is over anyway. And I want to assure you, if you're tuning into this and you're thinking, well, I am really, really anxious at the moment, that you're not weird for thinking that. What is weird actually is when, for most of the time, that we put on a mask when it comes to our fears. And in normal, we would consider normal times, that's how we often operate, isn't it? That you ask a guy how you're doing and you'll get the answer, oh, I'm fine. When actually there's loads of stuff raging on the inside, which we're just not prepared to reveal to each other. We kind of play a big game of let's pretend it's okay. But of course, that game becomes very unconvincing when we're facing the kind of experience that we're facing right now. Now, our normal response to pressure like this is either to fight it or flight. We run away. The kind of fight mode in this sense would be to work harder, to strive harder to take the fight against coronavirus. But of course, it's pretty hard to do that from your living room and from a laptop. We feel very helpless. The flight mode would be normally to escape the problems through leisure and pleasure. But we're finding, in a sense, all our escape routes for this are blocked, and even the box sets are becoming a little tedious after several weeks indoors with lots of kids running around the house. Fight and flight doesn't seem to be working. Now, in a short video like this, we can't even begin to answer the problems of anxiety in any great depth. What we're going to do over the coming weeks is to think through our worries, if you like, as a building with four pillars. So I want you to imagine that one pillar is our health, one pillar is our money, and two pillars at the back are maybe our pleasure and our family. And what's happening with COVID-19 is that the whole building, all those pillars are being put under pressure at the same time. They're all shaking, if you like, in the great earthquake and its aftershocks of COVID-19. Now, if there was just one pillar that was put under pressure, we might be able to cope in normal life, although it would come out in some way. There'll be cracks in some measure, but we might be able to cope. But all four pillars at the same time are being attacked, if you like. Now, what I want us to recognise is that the fears that we have are actually, from a biblical perspective, fears that we've had all along. It's just that they are now being brought out into the open. So let me change the illustration slightly. I've got a cup here which is full of water. Now, the contents of the cup remain invisible to you, but yet when I put it under pressure and shake it, it comes out over my laptop and my trousers. But the point is that it was already there. It's now just revealed by the shaking and the pressure that it has been put under. Now, in normal times, which register lower on the Richter scale, so to speak, we wouldn't see it. But we're not now in normal times, are we? Now, I'm struck as I read the Bible that the Lord's most common command to his people is, do not be afraid. That means, if you think about it, that the common experience for God's people throughout history is one of being confronted by things that are outside of their control. Now, it's not that God takes delight in pointing out that these things are outside of their control. It's just a recognition that he is God and we are not. And actually, that is normality. Now, Western culture in particular has put up a veil over normality, particularly since the Second World War, that has kind of said bad stuff doesn't happen. It's put out a sign kind of saying that, if you like, on our front lawn, or at least they shouldn't do. And if they do, we can solve them. The pride in that statement is astonishing if you think about it. And therefore, we have no way of handling disappointment and difficulty. And we so desperately, therefore, need to hear the Lord tenderly say to us, don't be afraid. which of course is exactly what Jesus does say when God himself comes in the person of his Son. He says, don't be afraid, don't be anxious. And things never looked more out of control or more desperate than when Jesus himself faced the cross. He was filled with an anguish, we're told, as he sweated blood, knowing that the next day he would pour out his blood for the forgiveness of sins, for the world and for you and me in our hearts. Yet in his final breath, what's astonished me as I've been thinking this week is that he chose to quote a psalm that was written 1,000 years before the events that he found himself in. Instead of in his final breath spitting anger and fury at what he experienced as an innocent man, he chose with his last breath to say, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. In other words, Lord, you're in complete control. I'm not enjoying this by any means, but I know that you're using this for good, that you will bring me through, and it is to bring a load of other souls through the veil of death in the fullness of time. And so it makes perfect sense, actually, when on Easter Sunday, as he rises from the dead to defeat our greatest fear, that his first words to a terrified bunch of disciples are, don't be afraid. Now, if we're going to think clearly, therefore, in the face of our fears, they will need to centre, our thoughts will need to centre around the person and the work of Jesus Christ. Now, if you're looking in, Easter is the perfect time to be able to do that. There's loads of resources on our website and places for you to go. Can I encourage you to do that? There's never been a more important time for you to consider the claims of Jesus Christ. But for all of us, when COVID-19 is over, as it will be, our comfort's going to be short-lived if we go back to playing the game of let's pretend. Let's put up that thin veil of normality like some curtain that's slipped, that we're actually in control and everything's okay. The fears on the inside, like the cup, will still be there. And now, and then, when that happens, we need the calm word of God. We need the word of Jesus over all the words that are going on in our world and in our hearts. Don't be afraid. Peace.